Hi, welcome to Satoshi Radio, the place where you learn everything about Bitcoin. I'm Bart and today we will set up our own server. So I hear you thinking, setting up a server, what does that have to do with Bitcoin? Let me explain. A server is simply a computer that runs 24/7. It could be a computer in your home or a laptop. For instance, the Umbro Home we installed last time is also a server. The issue with home servers is that they are usually only accessible through your home network. While this is fine for a Bitcoin node or a Plex server, it becomes tricky when running an online shop or when other people also need to access the server. That's where a VPS, a virtual private server, comes in. Essentially, you rent a computer in a data center. The best part? It's always online and has a public IP address. This means you can easily access the server and any software you install on it. You can run all kinds of software on your server. It's just a computer after all. Some examples, which are Bitcoin related, are a BTCPay Server and LMBits. But you can also run a Telegram bot on your VPS or host your website or online web shop. The VPS we will set up in this tutorial will be used for a BTCPay server, but I will show you how to do that next week. In this tutorial we are just going to set up the server. So that's what I will teach you this week. We'll just go to it together. We will rent a server and I will teach you how to manage a server and what security measures we must take. Since you control the VPS through the terminal, it might initially feel a little bit overwhelming. I mean, it was for me when I first started using the terminal. You have to do everything with text, with commands. You can't use your mouse. You don't have a visual clues. So it might feel a little bit overwhelming. It will take some time, but we will figure it out together. So let's get started. To make things a little bit easier, I've assembled a cheat sheet with all the commands that we will use in this tutorial so that you can easily copy and paste them. In the description, there is a link to this cheat sheet, which is on our GitHub. So the first thing we need, of course, is a server. We need to rent a computer in a data center somewhere. That's basically what we need to do. I like to use DigitalOcean. I think it's a nice VPS hosting part. I never had any problems with that, so I mainly use them. So I log in to my DigitalOcean account, and this is what you will see, the DigitalOcean dashboard. I created a new project called BTCPay Server. That's what you need to do with DigitalOcean. You create a new project and then you can put a VPS in that project. Under Resources, you will see the VPS listings. By the way, DigitalOcean calls these droplets. So a droplet is a VPS, which is just a server. All right? Yeah. It's a little bit unclear, but whatever. Droplets are VPSs. There are two ways to log into your VPS. A username and a password, or we can use an SSH key. An SSH key is a secure authentication method that uses a unique digital key instead of a password. It's more secure than a password because it cannot be guessed or cracked. It's just less prone to brute force attacks. We will use an SSH key because we're using the root account in this tutorial, at least for the beginning. Once you first set up a server like this, you always use the root account, and I just like to use an SSH key instead of a password. The root account is the most powerful account on your Linux system, with full access and permission to modify basically everything. To create the SSH key, let's open the terminal and enter the command ssh-keygen. We now see enter file in which to save the key. I usually copy the location shown on the screen and add an underscore and a name to it. In this case, we see ID_RSA, that's the standard path basically, and then I add an underscore with DigitalOcean after it. I will show you next why I do this, but it's basically to make it easier to identify which key belongs to what, especially when you start to make more SSH keys. Next, we're asked if we want to use a passphrase, which is like a password on top of your key. You will probably recognize it from Bitcoin, where we can also use a passphrase on top of our seed. I choose to use one and I enter my passphrase and hit enter. When typing your password or passphrase, you won't see any asterisks in your terminal. There are several other quirks like this when working in a terminal, but trust me, you will get used to it. I recommend storing your passphrase in a password manager. In this case, you will store the user, which is root, and the passphrase you just typed in. After this, a public and private key pair have been created. We will use these to log in into our DigitalOcean VPS later. So let's stay in the terminal for a moment, right? Because we have to get used to the terminal a little bit. I mean, this is, for a lot of people, this is kind of new. They don't know how to use it, and I can help you a little bit with that. So if you want to see all the keys you created, you can use the following command. So ls stands for list, L for more info, and A for hidden files. After that, we just type in the directory we want to see. So this command basically shows everything in the SSH directory, which is exactly what we need because we want to see all the keys that we made. So when we enter this command, we can indeed see the keys we just created. The public key is identifiable by the .pub extension. So the one with pub, behind it is the public key. That's also the key we will share with DigitalOcean. The private key, just as with Bitcoin, stays safely on your computer. You don't share that with anyone. So understanding exactly where I was when working in a terminal was always a bit challenging. You only have text to go with, where normally you have folders in the Finder, in the Explorer on Windows, where you can go back and forth with your mouse. You don't have to use a keyboard at all. So to make it a little bit more visual what we are doing, to clarify what we're doing, I will open a Finder window and go to my user, my own user, Bart Mol in this case. So I want to show the SSH folder that we just used in the terminal. So the SSH folder is a hidden folder because it has .ssh. So to show that on your computer, you can use the Mac key, Shift, and the dot. When you do that, you will instantly see all the hidden folders in a certain directory. So now that we can see all the hidden folders in our Finder window, we can open the SSH folder. There we see the keys we just saw in the terminal. So the keys we just created, the DigitalOcean keys. So the funny thing is that you can perform the same actions in the terminal as you usually would in your operating system. For instance, you can use this command to delete a key. RM stands for remove, and after that we specify what we want to remove, in this case the key. When I execute this command, you will see the public and private keys disappear in the folder itself as well. Because it's the same. The folder and the terminal, it's the same. We are doing things on the same computer, but it's really helpful to make it click, to show it together. This always helps me understand what I'm doing. So if we create the key again using the keygen command, we will see it reappear in the folder immediately. One extra tip, I often use ChatGPT or Claude or another AI to help me navigate the terminal. It really works well for me because they kind of know exactly which commands to use. You can easily copy and paste them. So I would really encourage you to use one of those AIs when trying to learn how to navigate in a terminal. So now that we have created our SSH keys, we can set up our new VPS. We will click on the green Create button in the DigitalOcean dashboard and select Droplets. I'm selecting a server in Amsterdam, but you should choose one of the closest to your customer. So if you're in the US, you will probably choose a server that is also in the US. Then I'll select the most recent LTS, long-term support, version of Ubuntu, which is 24.04, the 64-bit version in this case. Next, we will need to choose the VPS specifications. According to BTCPay, the minimum requirements are 2 GB of RAM and 1 CPU. I'm selecting the regular CPU option and the VPS with 2 GB of RAM, 2 CPUs and 60 GB of storage. Since we will run a pruned node instead of a full Bitcoin node, 60 GB will be sufficient. We will skip the additional storage and backup options. Moving on to the authentication method. We will use an SSH key rather than the password. That's why we made the SSH key before. I will click on New SSH key, which brings me to a pop-up with instructions. So we've already completed the first few steps. We've already made an SSH key. All we need to do now is retrieve and copy your public key into the SSH key content text box. We will do that with the following cat command. So what this command does is basically displaying the contents of a file in your terminal. In this case, the public key. Perfect. There's our public key, just as we want. We will copy the public key, this text, and paste it in the text box in the DigitalOcean dashboard. Then we will enter a name for this key. I will choose my own name, Bart, and then click on Add SSH key. So if we scroll down a little bit further, we can change the host name of the server. I find this helpful, especially when I'm managing multiple droplets or multiple servers. I'm changing the name to BTCPay Satoshi Radio. Finally, we'll click on Create Droplet. Now we just need to wait a few minutes for our server to be ready. This usually really only takes a couple of minutes, so go to the toilet, make a cup of coffee, and when you come back, the server is ready to go. So once the VPS is ready, the dashboard will look something like this. You can click on the VPS to see more details, but right now we only need the IP address, which is in my case 209.38.36.244. To log into the VPS, return to the terminal and enter the following command. Needless to say, your IP address will be different than the one I'm using. So before we go further, let's break down this command. What did we actually do? So SSH is used to establish a remote connection. The I flag specifies which key we want to use. We then provide the key's location. Finally, we indicate which user to log into and where. In this case, we're logging in as the root user at our VPS's IP address. When we run this command and when everything goes well, we need to enter our passphrase. That's the one we've just saved in the password manager, so the passphrase for the root user. Once that's done, we've successfully logged into our server. The terminal now shows that we're logged into the VPS as the root user. So before moving on to the next step, it's crucial to understand that we are no longer logged into our laptop, the local machine, but rather our VPS, the remote machine. So we made a switch. This distinction is essential when creating another SSH key later, as that must be done on your local machine. So now that we're logged in to the VPS with the root user, we need to prepare our server. So let's start by installing all available updates on the server. Installing updates is, in my opinion, always a smart move. Like on your phone or laptop, keeping your system up to date ensures that you have the latest security patches and improvements, which helps protect you against potential vulnerabilities. We'll enter the following command to install the updates to the system. It's this command that you see on the screen, so let's break it down. apt is the package manager, and the update command searches for the newest updates for all packages on your server. So this is basically checking for all the latest updates that are available. The and signs, the double and signs in the middle, they ensure that the following command only runs if the first command was successful. So basically if it found new updates that can be installed on your server. So the second part, the apt upgrade, automatically installs any updates found. When we hit enter, the system will start working its magic, which will usually take around a few minutes. You can also see it is starting to do all kinds of stuff. So the problem with installing updates is that people often forget about them, right? I mean, this is true for phones and also for laptops, but even more for servers. Because on your phone you get a notification that there's a new update. But for servers you must manage this yourself. I mean, there are no notifications if you don't install anything, if you don't customize anything. So you can add it to your calendar and manually run the update and upgrade commands once a week. I mean, that's perfectly fine if you want to do that. I find it easier to automate the update process. This is completely optional. I mean, there's also quite a debate around this approach. Automatic updates could cause parts of your system to freeze. However, this rarely happens, and for a hobby server like ours, it's not really a big deal if you experience a few hours of downtime. To enable automatic updates, we will install unattended upgrades by entering the following command. If we look at the command again, we have apt, again that's the package manager that allows you to install additional software. And the install command tells the system we want to install a package, in this case the unattended upgrade package. We can also use apt remove package name if we want to remove a package, or apt upgrade or apt update that we just did. After installing unattended upgrades, we need to configure it. To do this, we enter the following command. The dpkg reconfigure command indicates that we want to reset a package configuration settings. The p-low flag shows all available settings. Finally, we want to specify which package we want to configure. In this case, unattended upgrades. After we enter this command, we press enter. A ping configuration screen appears asking if we want to install automatic updates, which we want. So we navigate to yes and press enter. It's time to check the configuration and make some minor adjustments. Configuration files are usually text files where you can modify settings by removing the hash symbol or the /. This is what we call uncommenting. The apps or software will search through the configuration files and only look at the rules or the lines that are uncommented. So if you want to add something, you remove the comment, and if you want to remove something, you basically add a comment. So to open and view the configuration file, we enter the following command. Nano is the tool we use to edit text files. It's basically a text editor. The rest is the configuration file's location. So you should now see the configuration file in your terminal. It should look something like this. A lot of text. Notice that most lines start with a /, meaning they're inactive. Lines without the slashes are active. So currently, security updates are installed automatically. Because they are not commented, there are no slashes in front of the line. But regular updates aren't, there's a / there. So let's change this by removing the / from the updates line. There are 3 more things I want to adjust. Automatic server restart after updates, automatic restarts when users are logged in, and the timing of those restarts. To enable automatic restart, scroll down until you find unattended upgrade automatic reboot false. We need to do 2 things here. The first one is simple, remove the 2 slashes, uncomment this rule, and change the false value to true. The following line we need to change is unattended upgrade automatic reboot with users. It's funny, this line is already true, but it's still commented out, so we only need to remove the /. Finally, let's set the timing for automatic updates. Look for unattended upgrade automatic reboot time. It's set to 2 o'clock, so that's fine, we only need to remove the slashes. When we're done, we press Ctrl and X to close this screen. Before we close, it asks if we want to save our changes. We press yes and then on enter. The last step is to test whether everything works. To do this, enter unattended upgrades, dry run, debug. Since we just updated this server, we shouldn't see any pending updates. And indeed, we see all packages installed. This works fine, automatic upgrades, done. Let's proceed to the next step. Until now, we've been using the root user, right? Which you can see in the terminal as well. We are logged in with root. The root user is like a god. It has complete access to all files and software on your server. Best practice is to disable the root user after the initial setup and create a new one instead. This new user can temporarily gain root user privileges through the sudo command. Sudo stands for super user do. It kind of means like throwing on your Superman cape and you can become Superman for just one command. Not permanently, but one command. This setup is more secure because it clearly shows who's using the super user privileges at any given time. This is particularly important on servers with multiple users. It becomes way easier to audit what happened because sudo commands, sudo actions are logged, and when everybody is just using the root user, like, yeah, who did what? So it's better to disable the root user and make multiple users for everybody that is using the system, and if needed, you can give them sudo privileges. So creating a new user is straightforward. While still logged in as root, we enter the command add user and then the username. In my case, add user Bart. Next, we'll need to set a password. Store this password safely in a password manager as you will need it later for sudo commands. So after you save the password in your password manager, we can fill in some additional information here, like a room number if I'm correct, but you don't have to do that. I mean, if you want to, whatever floats your boat, just do it. But when finished, enter yes and press on enter. So now that we've created the user, we need to add them to the sudo group so they can execute super user commands, right? That's what we talked about. This is fairly simple. To do this, we enter usermod ag sudo bart. So usermod is the command for modifying a user. A stands for append, add basically, and G for group. And sudo is the sudo group. So we're basically adding a user to the sudo group. In this case, it's the user Bart, but you will need to use your own username, of course. So let's use the terminal with the root account to temporarily switch to the new user. We do this by entering su Bart to test if everything works. So we see the switch happening. We've now created our user, given him sudo rights, and we're now logged in as this user. If you look at the terminal, we are not logged in as root, but as Bart. Now it's time to verify that everything went smoothly and that we can use the sudo command. So let's enter sudo whoami. We must enter our password first, since this is a sudo command. Afterward, we should see the root displayed. This makes sense because we are executed this command as the root user, right? Because we did super user do. So if I'm using the whoami command without sudo, we get Bart. And that's perfectly fine because I didn't put on my Superman cape. I just asked who am I when I was logged in as Bart. Perfect, so everything is working as intended. To switch back to the root user, we simply enter exit and press enter. So we just created a new user on the server. Perfect. However, we still have one issue. How can we log in with this user? Since we've disabled password authentication, we'll also need to set up an SSH key for this user, the user Bart. Let's start by opening an additional terminal window. On the top screen, I'm logged into the server as root. And on the bottom screen, I'm logged into my laptop as Bart Mol, the normal user on my laptop. So the first step is to create an SSH key on the laptop. I will enter the following SSH command. SSH keygen is the standard command for creating an SSH key. We already did this before. The -t ed25519 specifies the encryption type we're using. Finally, we use the -c BTCPay Server user Bart to add a label to the key. This makes it easier to distinguish which key is for what. Then we're asked where to save the keys. As we did before, I will add some extra information to the key name to help us identify its purpose later. So we will copy the path and the file name and add _BTCPay to it. Next, we're prompted for a passphrase different from the password we created earlier. Enter the passphrase and hit enter. You will need to enter it again to confirm. Then save your passphrase in your password manager. So you will have a username, in my case Bart, a password for the sudo command, and the passphrase to log in. Three things should be stored in your password manager. So that means also you have two accounts now in your password manager. One for root with a passphrase and one for Bart, the normal user, with a password and the passphrase. So after completing all this, you will see all the information in your terminal. But something else is also happening. The keys will now appear in our SSH folder. Now you can see why giving them clear names is helpful. It makes them so much more easier to distinguish. I can see my DigitalOcean key that I use for the root login, and I can see the BTCPay key that I use for my normal user. Next, we will need to copy the public key that we created to the authorized keys file on the server. Let's first check if that directory and that file actually exists already on the server. We will switch from the root user to Bart using the command su Bart. We will then use the following commands to see if the directories and the files exist. The answer is no. No such file or directory. This means we need to create the directory ourselves. So to create the directory, we use the following command. mkdir stands for make directory, basically create a folder. And the p flag prevents some error messages. After that, we specify what we are actually creating, in this case the hidden folder SSH. After executing this command, we move on to the next one. chmod 700 to the SSH folder. This command ensures that only the owner, me, can access this directory. Finally, we need to create the authorized keys file to store the public key, to store the authorized key that can be used to access the server. We first use the touch command to create the file, then chmod 600 to restrict the access to the file owner, which is me. So instead of make directory, we use touch here. So make directory makes a directory, touch makes a file. So if we run the ls command again, we will now see a response stating that the directory and the file have been created. We get a response. First it said no file or directory, and now we can actually see that a file has been created. So next thing, we need to add our public key from our laptop, right? That is still on our laptop, to this authorized key file on our server. So this is pretty simple. We use this command, it's an echo command, and what it basically does is it copies the public key into the authorized keys file. But to do that, we need to fill in the public key after the echo command. So we return to the terminal on our laptop and enter the following cat command. The cat command allows us to quickly view the contents of a file. In this case, the contents of our public key. When we press enter, the public key indeed appears in the terminal. So we select the complete public key and we copy it. So with the public key copied, we return to the terminal where we were logged in to the server. There we will enter the public key into the echo command. It will look something like this. So like I said, this command copies the public key into the authorized keys file. If the file doesn't exist, it creates it. If it does exist, it will append it. So if we now use the cat command, you will see that we no longer have an empty file. Our public key is in there, is copied into the authorized key file. So now let's test if this works. We go back to our laptop's terminal, so the local machine, and then we use the following SSH command. So we press enter our passphrase, et voila! We are logged in into our own server with our own user. You can actually see it. You can see Bart and then the BTCPay server hostname. So we are logged in with our own user. We are not using the root user anymore. Yeah, we made our own user. We logged in. We are not using passwords. We are using SSH keys. Everything works. Perfect. I love it when the plan comes together. In the terminal where we were already logged in, we use the command exit to switch back from Bart to the root user, right? Then on the other terminal, we use exit, so the laptop's terminal, to log out of the VPS. So now we end up with two terminals, one with the root user on the VPS and one on the laptop itself. So we just logged in to our VPS with our own user, which is great, but the login command is quite cumbersome, to be honest. Let's be honest, guys. Like SSH -I SSH ID ED255. Fortunately, we can solve this by creating an SSH Config File. So an SSH Config File is basically a file where you store all the information that we previously put in the command that we just used. It's pretty straightforward. Let me show you. We'll create a config file on our laptop. So we will use the following nano command. This command creates a config file in the SSH folder and immediately opens it in the nano text editor. We will paste the following information into this now empty file. Host is BTCPay. Then we will fill in the rest of the info. Hostname is the VPS's IP address. The user is Bart, the user we just created, which will be different for you. And the identity file is the location and the name of the public key. Once we have filled everything in, we simply use Ctrl-X to save and exit. We now only have to use SSH plus the host we configured to log into our server. In our case, it's SSH BTCPay. If everything is set up correctly, we should now enter our passphrase and we're logged in. So to summarize, we made a user, we made a password for the user, we added the user to the sudo group, we made a public-private key pair, and we logged in via SSH with our configuration file. Pretty cool and pretty easy. So next time you only have to remember SSH BTCPay and then filling your passphrase, which is in your password manager, and you're immediately logged in to your VPS. Way better than passwords and all kinds of weird commands. So now that our user account is set up, it's time to deactivate the root account. For this, we will need to use the terminal with the root user, which has remained active throughout this tutorial. We'll start by entering the following command. The file that opens will contain permit root login, which we will need to locate and change from yes to no. Then we scroll down to verify that password authentication is also disabled. which we can confirm by checking for a hashtag in front of that line. Or when it just says password authentication no. This should be the case because we enter that when we set up our droplet in DigitalOcean. After making these changes, press Ctrl X to save and exit. There might be additional password related settings in other locations. You can quickly check these by running the following commands. In my case, both files show that passwords are disabled, exactly what we want. To complete this section, let's restart the SSH service by running sudo systemctl restart SSH. Then we will log out using the exit command. At this point, it's no longer possible to log in via SSH using the root user. Alright, let's take a moment to breathe. Deep in, out. Pat yourself on the back. The hardest part is behind us. We still have 2 things to do, but they're pretty easy compared to what we just went through. We're going to set up a firewall, and after that we are going to configure fail to ban. Let's start with the firewall. Firewall allows you to control which ports are open for accessing your VPS. In simple terms, you only want to keep open the ports that you actually use. So installing the firewall is straightforward. We will use the command sudo apt install ufw. Do you see the pattern? Is it beginning? Are the pieces starting to fall? Are they starting to come together? So we use the sudo command superuser do because we are not logged in with the root user anymore. We are just a normal user that can sometimes transform to the superuser. We use apt, the package manager. Then we need to say what the package manager needs to do. Remove, update, upgrade, no, install in this case. And then the last part, install ufw, which is the package we want to install, the firewall in this case. After entering this, we will need to input our password, since this is a sudo command after all, and the installation process will begin. Now let's configure the firewall. We will use 2 commands, sudo ufw default deny incoming and sudo ufw default allow outgoing. What we're essentially doing here is blocking all incoming traffic while allowing all outgoing traffic. Next, we will specify which incoming traffic we want to permit. First and foremost, we need to allow SSH connections, otherwise we will lock ourselves out of our server, right? So we will enter the command sudo ufw allow SSH. We will do the same for several other ports. To do this, we will run the command sudo allow at/tcp. And we will do the same for 443, 9735 and 8333. Finally, we'll activate the firewall by entering sudo ufw enable, and after that using sudo ufw status verbose to verify that it works correctly. And there you have it. All our ports that we just opened are listed. For the record, port 22 corresponds to the SSH port, the one that we opened first. So we've reached the final part of this tutorial. The final piece of the puzzle is fail to ban. It's a tool that can detect when someone makes multiple login attempts. For example, if someone enters an incorrect login credentials more than 5 times in a short time period, they get temporarily banned. Fail to ban accomplishes this by creating temporarily firewall rules in UFW. So installation is straightforward, so let's get quickly into that. We start with the command, there we have it again, sudo apt install fail to ban. Once that's done, we need to configure fail to ban. We do this by running the following command. So if you look at this command, you see an interesting thing happening. We're basically using the default template as a blueprint for our own settings. CP stands for copy. So once we've copied the file, we can open it with the sudo nano command. We need to check and adjust several settings. First, we will need to check if SSHD is enabled and which port is configured to use. In our case, we just need to remove the hashtag and make sure that it's on port 22. So furthermore, we can see that our ban time is set to 10 minutes, find time is also set to 10 minutes, and the max retry is 5. This basically means that if somebody uses incorrect credentials for more than 5 times in a time window of 10 minutes, they get banned for 10 minutes. This is fine as is, but you can make it a little bit stricter. I'm setting the ban time to 60 minutes, This means that the user will be banned for an hour after 5 failed login attempts in 10 minutes. I'm leaving the max retry and the fine time at 5 and 10 minutes respectively. So 5 login attempts, 10 minutes. Finally, we run the sudo command systemctl start fail to ban, which starts the service. To see its status, we use the sudo fail to ban client status sshd. So the funny thing is, or maybe the horrifying thing, that in a few minutes since we started running fail to ban, multiple login attempts have already occurred. So guys, there we are, take a deep breath. That was quite a journey. In this tutorial, we purchased our own server, performed the initial setup with the root account, created our own user, configured SSH keys, disabled root access, set up our own firewall and protected ourselves against brute force attacks using fail to ban. I mean, we did all this groundwork and now we can truly enjoy our server. We could set up an LMBit server, Umbrel, a website, a Telegram bot, or a BTCPay server. I think BTCPay servers are the easiest way to accept Bitcoin payments and it's perfect for an online web shop. We will discuss this in our next episode. Yeah, I really hope you liked this tutorial. It was maybe a bit difficult, maybe a bit out of your comfort zone. But, I mean, if you follow the steps and if you use the cheat sheet that I attached in the description, I mean, nothing can really go wrong. So I hope you now have your own well-protected server. And hopefully you will be there in the next episode so we can put a BTCPay server on it. But you can start experimenting yourself. Like I said, you can put an LMBit server, you can put your own website, which is pretty cool. A Telegram bot, a Bitcoin Telegram bot. Pretty nice. All things you can do. But for now, I think it's time to log out. Celebrate your hard work. Grab a beer, grab a wine, sit down, maybe a cup of coffee, maybe some snacks. Right? Maybe some snacks. Put on a nice movie and just chill for a bit. Go for a walk, do something fun. And in the next episode, we will install BTCPay Server on this new server we just created. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the comments. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. And for the rest, have a great week. Have a great day. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Ciao. Peace out. Later.